Good afternoon. What is a bright, sunny but chilly day? It is Monday, the 25th of November, and I'm in the reading up with a nice hot cup of tea and a box to continue unboxing. And what I've got here is a special book. This is Free Trader Beowulf, a system history of the role-playing game Traveller. So, this is Free Trader Beowulf calling anyone, Mayday, Mayday. A box emblazoned with those words went on sale for the first time on July 22nd, 1977, at the Origins 3 Game Fair, heralding the advent of the Traveller role-playing game from GDW. It wasn't the first science fiction role-playing game, but through its innovative design and through the development of its evocative universe of charted space, it would become the longest-running science fiction role-playing game in the industry. However, its path would not be simple. After Traveller reached its early apogee just 4 years on, it would face decades of increasing problems, raising many questions. Why did GDW decide to shatter their imperium? What led them to seek outside help to produce the second edition of the game? Why did they abandon the Traveller game system with the next revision? How could such a popular publisher face bankruptcy just 2 decades on? Similarly, what happened to Imperium Games, QuickLink Interactive, and others who followed in GDW's footsteps as they inherited the Traveller legacy? And finally, how did Mongoose Publishing reach into the past to bring Traveller back to its position as the industry's best-loved science fiction role-playing game? This volume answers those questions and more. It tracks Traveller from its inspirations in the early 70s through its initial publication and across 7 distinct editions of the original 2D6 game system. It reveals the stories of Traveller's 3 major publishers, GDW, Imperium Games, and Mongoose, as well as many licensees. More importantly, it tells how Traveller fell into the increasing darkness before descending into a long night, and how it rose again as a phoenix. From the author of Designers and Dragons, which told the story of the entire role-playing industry, comes the intimate history of a single role-playing game, culled from hundreds of primary sources and interviews. This is a Designers and Dragons system history. There we go. So it's published by Mongoose Publishers, by publishing, and it's part of the Designers and Dragons line, written and researched by Shannon Applestein. So this essentially is a history of Traveller. It's one of the few role-playing games we're having a discussion where you can actually have this kind of history. You might want to look at perhaps RuneQuest as another one. Rick Mites has already done that with the MIGS collection, which Volume 3 have already done an unboxing of. But there are others potentially as well. So we open up. And the other thing to note is that there is an error on the spine. I wonder if you can spot it. Yep. This is Free Trader Beowulf. Beowulf. Wolf. Yeah, Beowulf, not Beowulf. I mean, that's a problem essentially with the choice of font. But and in some way, the author has already delved into the history of traveling, certainly in terms of its inspirations, in terms of its fiction. That book is available on drive-through. So we have credits page, and then contents page, which runs a couple of pages before we begin with GDW before the game, 1973, 1977, but really goes back a bit before that, really with the origins of how Mark Miller and other designers got interested in gaming, as can be shown by the inclusion of the board game D-Day, massive Avalon Hill game. They were the members of sort of like the GDW, what became GDW, were war gamers rather than necessarily role players, and that showed up in some of the designs. And you can see here those designs being discussed. Triplanetary Imperium, and others. And then basically, really, their first proto role playing game is On Guard, which is 40 years old next year, 2025. And then at the end of this section, you've got a view from the industry. You give basically putting the hobby in context at the time. I mean, that's drawing upon Applesign's experience writing the Dungeons and Dragons, the Designers of Dragons series as a whole. So, and here we have a checklist for certain products. So here we have a checklist of all of GDW's um, board games, generic board games. Got a list of references. More useful, perhaps, if you are. They can be clicked on some of those. So if you've got the PDF version of this, and then we're into the actual Genesis, essentially the beginnings of travel with the little black books, and a quick guide to early science fiction role playing. And essentially exploring how Traveller innovated, because essentially it's a much more technical game because it had to deal with much more technical subject matters. Again, we move on to 1977, a view of the industry. And we have photographs from the period. We have a list of essentially GDW other role-playing games. And I mean, this is going to be a mixture, really, of the book of the familiar and the unfamiliar. But we do have discussion of the other role-playing games that Game Designers Workshop published. A lot of which will be familiar with their fans. And again, references at the end of the chapter. And then we move on to sections sort of exploring the Imperium and its genesis, essentially through the pages of the Journal of Travelers Aid Society, and how the first settings came about in the industry. And then we have a list of all the classic adventures. So the Spinwood Marches and where they're set, for the Solomani Rim and where they're set. And here we close out the little black book era. We've got a look at Ashanti High Lightning. Nice shot of a hiver there. And I've got a complete checklist. And then the licensees, basically those other publishers who produce content for the Traveller, rules and setting over the years. Essentially done through land grants, as you can see through this map. And just looking at sort of like some of the books that came out. And it's interesting to look at the Chicago nexus of publishers and authors there, which would ultimately become would ultimately become the role-playing game publisher we know as FASA. And then we have some unpublished licensed books. They look fantastic. You just think, oh, what a pity. And then we have, again, classic adventures from those publishers and where they are in charted space. And similarly, you've got one does the same thing for area around Maryland. And I've got a list there of other licensed products at the end. So Really nice look at also of essentially what could have been. I really there's one aspect that is always interesting to look at as well as the actual history. Um, Discusses Striker. Um, and software makers basically producing programs for the game. We've got a full list of all checklist of all the licensed products by publisher, um, and just completely laid out references at the end of each chapter. And then we move on to the big color books. This is essentially where we move into the Mega Traveler era. We have a look at sort of essentially role playing in 1981, and this is the period where I entered role playing. When I was 12, going on 13. Um, Essentially, what could have been in terms of classic Traveller before we get to um, Mega Traveller, and then we've got essentially looking at the aliens of charted space. And Traveller elsewhere in other languages. And then the relationship between GDW and DGP, Digest um, publications, um, including look at the Traveller Digest, the fanzine, and the magazine that they published, and really um, helped to develop the setting. I've got a look at the science fiction of the role playing. The setting, the 80s. You also have a look at the other Traveller, Traveller 2300, what became 2300 AD. Was actually really a sequel um, um, to Twilight 2000. A section on the Grand Tour, the campaign, to be found in the pages of the digest. I'm actually in the process of reviewing those very slowly, very occasionally. I'm really enjoying going back to that early Traveller and bringing it to life, in a review, reading it. Right, it's Chili So Cold Fingers section here on role playing in 1987, hitting some of the highlights. I mean, these are role playing games from there's 1984 for Paranoia, 1985 Pendragon, both classic role playing games of the period. And here we run into essentially, the rebellion period, the fall of the Imperium, assassination of the Emperor. Um, and they've got a list of all the adventures in the Spoonwood Marches during the rebellion era and where they are. Basically, listing all of these essentially are either in Challenge or Traveller's Digest, or most of them are. There are supplements as well, but few and far between. And then this, what could have been with the Digest um, groups, publications, Mega Traveller books, looking at extra software companies at the time. As I say, this is quite an awkward book to um, um, handle. We've got a list of the diaspora hard times adventures. Essentially, the collapse will be hastened not just by the Civil War, but the release of the vampire virus and so on. And here we have the withdrawal of Digest from the Traveller market. Really disappointing. But there we go. Because the content was absolutely great. We have High Imperium Working Group and Designs the Growing Fandom. Really nice that this book does acknowledge that fandom. And in some ways, it's sort of like, in some ways, the fandom kind of keeps it going. I'm going to look at RPG fandom of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I think that's probably a little bit short there for just 3 decades. There's more to it than that. Each of the fandom is kind of different in each of those eras. Um, and the rise of the High Imperium working group and its fall. And we got the contents of the essentially looking at the content that the HIWG published. And we've got a full list of all sort of like all the fanzines. And somewhere there is someone with all of this. You know, you just go, what a fantastic library. And then we're going to leap into the new era. All playing in 1983. Basically, where have we got? Essentially, as much sort of like as an attempt to kind of recover the setting as much as the players were recovering the setting themselves. So essentially, it was the equivalent of a post-apocalyptic science fiction setting across the stars, where whole worlds have been shattered. List of all the diaspora adventures and their locations. And another list of what could have been. And really, we come to the end of GDW is in existence. And with the close of DDW's doors, we have a history of the Imperium, the T4 era, including the Whitman crash, look at role playing in 1997, then having a renaissance following the crash of its own in the wake of the Rise and spread of Magic the Gathering. Look at the stuff that's coming out from BITS, British Isles Traveller Support. List of what could have been with T4. And then 1997 shattered the long night when there really was no Traveller. Essentially, its own nightfall, its own long night, sort of like a period between the rise of civilizations. There was basically role playing in 2001. Only seems that sort of like, oh, that was only 23 years ago. But we have the rise of GURPS Traveller. Not everyone's favourite, but it was comprehensive in its treatment. And we've got a list of what Steve Jackson Games could have published. And then the T20, essentially the version of the gateway setting for Traveller, the lay gateway, using the D20 system. And then what could have been with QLI, Quick Link Interactive, produced a lot of PDFs, some interesting stuff, which has subsequently been republished by Mongoose. I can remember that was kind of my entry into role-playing Traveller at that point and reviewing it, certainly for the pages of the Journal of Traveller's Aid Society, which was then being published by Steve Jackson Games. Oh, it is a bit windy here. We've got essentially discussion of Comstar, which would have been a fascinating direction for Traveller to go in, certainly with the 1248 series, and even a discussion of the version of Traveller using Hero, which is quite rare to find these days. And then we mark the end of an era, 2007. But with much fanfare, we are into essentially major events of the long night. A list of all the checklist of all the books. Rise of the Third Imperium with Mongoose. Marking a new golden age with the first edition, which is fantastic to see back. And basically, an even spread involving other role-playing system settings. Judge Dredd 2000 AD, which Mongoose had the license for at the time. But it has to be said, you've got, first edition was rough in many ways. The Spoonwood Marches Adventures from Mongoose and where they're set. And then we have Mark Miller's re-involvement in the hobby with T5, Traveller 5, available basically as either a brick or there's a set of 3 books going back to the black books, and a list of what could have been T5. Before coming very much up to date with the current version, Stratford Lives 2015 to present, with the second edition, which is a much cleaned up, much more accessible version of the rules, accompanied by the rise of Cepheus as basically as an OGL system, so that the designers can go and create their own content and settings, and highlighting just some of the content that Mongoose has published. Notably, of course, sorry, Pirates of Drenax, great campaign, and it's not the first, and it's the one of many that has been published since. And then even a couple of years ago, role playing in 2022, and the Chartered Space of Mongoose, Traveller, and yet what could be. And you've got a full checklist of all the books and so on back, and then further references and for more history of the hobby. So this is Free Trader, Beowulf, a system history of Traveller. Absolute must for Traveller fans. If you're a Traveller fan, long-time Traveller fan, you're absolutely going to want this. If you're a fan of the role-playing in general and of history of role-playing, then you're also going to want to have a look at this, because it charts history of several companies as well as the role-playing game Traveller itself. Anyway, in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this unboxing in the Nook. If you did, then please do click on the like button down below. And if you've got any comments or feedback, I do appreciate you taking the time to post those. And lastly, if you want to be alerted to get more unboxings in the Nook, where you'll see me out here with a box containing a book or game or role-playing supplement, which I will unbox and chat about to the best extent of my knowledge for roughly 10 minutes or so, all of course accompanied by a nice cup of tea, then please do click on the subscribe button down below. Thanks again for watching another unboxing in the Nook. I will be back again soon with another one. Bye for now.